step is basically to check the three reading message. Okay, so let's start. Now, Ozzy the Iceman, found in 1991, the Odzal Alps, this well-preserved mummy of a man has been affectionately named Ozzy the Iceman. He is Europe's oldest natural mummy and has been estimated to have lived around 3300 BC. Now, originally thought to be a climber that had dashed not long ago, Ozzy was then found to be an ancient mummy. So it was originally found to be a climber. Okay, climber means someone who climbs. Another thing is the year given here is 5000 years ago. Now we live in 2000 AD, and so we deduct 2000 from 5000 to go to 0 AD, and before that, that is called before Christ, there is 3300 BC. So let's mark that down. So this is more than 5000 years ago, definitely, because 3300 plus 2020 is 5320. So more than 5000 years ago. Now, when first found, people thought this body was the body of a recently deceased. Deceased means dead, or someone who has died recently. Climber means someone who climbs mountains or other things. It was only when Ozzy was taken to the University of Innsbruck that it was fairly quickly determined that this was an ancient mummy. So initially, it was thought that it was probably a climber. Then it died very quickly, and then once it was taken to a university, it was found that it was a mummy. Now, originally thought to be a climber that had. Now it's it had. Had means in the past, since we found here that originally, when first people found this, the body was thought to be deceased climber. So originally it was thought to be a deceased climber. So that had deceased climber, no, that had recently deceased. Recently deceased not long ago. Yes, that sounds more fair. So we'll write recently deceased. All right. Then Ozzy was then found to be an ancient mummy that had lived over 5000 years ago. So this statement is exactly the same as this paragraph. Scientists determined the location he had lived in because his body had a certain type of dash on it. So his body had a certain type of dash, and hence they could determine where he lived. Okay. So it was finally determined that Ozzy was about 45 years old when he died, weighed 50 kg, and was 1.65 meters tall. It was even possible to tell which village he had lived. So basically, they found out the location he lived, which is exactly the same as which village he had lived, and then they were able to he had lived by the type of pollen and dust rain. So they were able to understand where he lived depending on the pollen and dust rain on his body. So basically, because this is a dead body, the pronoun used can change to on it because it stands instead of dead body. Okay, and they found pollen grains on his body, which shows or which basically um, gives you an indication of where he lived. So we can write pollen or you can write dust rain. Both are correct. So for the simplicity of it, I would write pollen because one other thing is here it mentions a certain type of, and here by the type of. So certain times means specific type of pollen. Okay. Through dash, we now know that he regularly ate a mixture of different foods, including wheat, bread, and root vegetables. So by doing something, we have found out that he regularly ate a certain type of food. His diet, see what he ate, right? His diet from several months before he died was determined by hair analysis. So we know what kind of food ate by the hair analysis, right? So we'll just go ahead and write down the answer here. Analysis. We know that he regularly ate a mixture of different foods, including wheat bread and root vegetables. It's written here, wheat bread and root vegetables. Okay. The season he died in was also worked out by the presence of dash. So the time of the year that he died in was worked out by the presence of something. So on this death, most likely happened in spring because of the presence of very fresh pollen that is only seen at this time of the year. So the presence of this pollen indicated how he died or which season he died in, right? So we again will just write down presence of fresh pollen, and then we'll go ahead. Ozzy was not in the best of health had in fact been ill. I'm sorry about this. Ozzy was not in the best of health and in fact had been ill. So he had been ill dash not so long ago as shown by the marks on his nails. So he was not healthy for a few months maybe and then he died and this was indicated by some of the markings on his nails. So high levels of copper and arsenic were also found in his hair, suggesting that he might have been involved in making bronze mixture of copper, arsenic, or tin. The copper axe found by his side was probably made by him. Lines on one of the two fingernails found indicate that he had been ill 3 times in the last 6 months. So here, in fact, been ill not so long ago, as shown by the marks. We know the time. We know maybe 3 times in the last 6 months. But the thing is, basically here in fact been ill and then we need to put a word that connects these two parts, this clause and the first clause. Let's see, in fact not been ill, okay. We so been ill 3 times in the last 6 months. In the last 6 months is not so long ago, so we can write 3 times, okay. Not so long ago, as shown by the marks on his nail. Different tattoos on his body might have been used for dash. So there were some tattoos in his body. Those are like drawings people make on the screen, and it shows that it might have been used for something. Ozzy had several tattoos, including a cross behind his right knee and various marks around ankles. These might have been used for decoration. So these tattoos were used for decoration. He was a well-dressed man with the type of clothes that suggested he was a tribal dash. So he was really well dressed, well clothed. He had good clothing, and it showed that he was a tribal dash. Okay, let's see. He wore a cloak made of woven grass and a coat, a belt, a pair of leggings, a loin cloth. These are his clothing, by the way. These are descriptions of his clothing, all made of leather, different skins. This was seen as very sophisticated for the time and suggests that Ozzy was a chief of a tribe. So he was a what was he in the tribe? He was a tribal chief. His position in the tribe was a tribal chief. Okay. Now after this, let's go to the next few questions. Now the next few questions is basically we have to complete the sentences below using no more than 3 words or a number. So let's start. Dash was impossible to buy more than 200 years ago. Something was not possible to buy more than 200 years ago. So let's see. This is in the next passage. Okay. It is difficult to imagine in today's world of high technology, but in the 19th century, 19th century means 1800 to 1899. So basically today is 2020. So 1800 is around 200 years ago. It was impossible to find a waterproof coat. So we can write waterproof coat was impossible to buy how many centuries ago? 2 centuries ago, right? Because today it's 21st century. So 19th century is 2 centuries ago. 19th century is 2 centuries ago. That's around 200 years. Waterproof jacket. Okay. And then we go to the next one. Macintosh went to university instead of working for the dash. So let's see. Whenever it rained, you were sure to get wet from head to toe. This was all to change with a little help from Charles Macintosh, a Scottish chemist and inventor. Born in 1766, he was expected to spend his life working for his father in the family business, dyeing wool and silk. Charles had other ideas. After leaving school, he studied chemistry at a university in Glasgow, and after graduating, he was employed as a clerk with a merchant. So here, Macintosh went to university instead of working for the Dash. Now, he was expected to spend his life for his father in the family business. But Charles had other ideas. So instead of going to work for his father in the family business, he had other ideas, and hence he went to University of Glasgow to study chemistry. So instead of working under his father or working for his father, what he did that he went to university and got a degree. So instead of working under his father for the family business, right? So for the exact same thing, we'll just write down for the family business. Family business. By the time he was dash, he had started his own company. So by the time of his certain age, he started his own company. This was a stepping stone, as Charles never gave up his life of his science, particularly chemistry, and spent all his free time studying. By the time he was 20, so when he was 20 years old, Charles had given up his job and opened up his own company manufacturing various chemicals, including ammonium chloride and Prussian blue dye. So he started his own business, started his own manufacturing company, company manufacturing various chemicals. So by the time he was 20, he basically stopped doing the job and then opened his own business. He was an entrepreneur even in that day. Okay, so Macintosh played a big part in the dash that was happening in the time. Something was happening in the time, and he played a big part. Let's see. Um, he was okay. Let's start from here. This became a successful business of Charles, but he was not the kind of man just to focus on one thing. He was constantly looking for better ways and easier ways to do things, and with the help of James Beaumont Nelson, he developed a process to make high quality cast iron. This was an essential part of the Industrial Revolution. Now, Industrial Revolution is a time period in UK during which industries opened all around the place. Like they were shifting from small businesses to huge organizations. So this particular period is very important for the modern world because this allowed manufacturing to happen quickly, and it improved people's lives greatly. So he was an essential part. So he was important. He was an important person, and he played a part in the industrial revolution. So Macintosh played a big part in the industrial revolution, which was happening at the time. Industrial revolution. Coal tar naphtha was a dash from the coal tar naphtha. Okay, let's see. After the death of his father, Charles inherited the family business and began to look for ways to. Okay. After the death of his father, Charles inherited the family business and began to look for ways to. After the death of his father, Charles inherited the family business and began to look for ways to invest his money. Around the same time, in 1817, the Glasgow Gaslight Company was established, and Charles became interested in finding a use for the waste products from the coal gas industry. So he found a particular way in which he could use the uh, something. He was a dash from the coal gas industry. Okay, let's see what this is. One of these was the waste product known as coal tar naphtha. So coal tar naphtha was a waste product from the coal gas industry. Waste product. Okay, let's look at the next sentence. Oh, after some research, Macintosh was able to make dash waterproof. He was able to make something waterproof. With a touch of genius that perhaps no one else at the time could have thought of, Charles combined his knowledge of dyeing material with his love of chemistry. The result was a liquid rubber that, when combined with other textiles, made them waterproof. So, after some research, Macintosh was able to make textiles waterproof or liquid rubber. Now, the thing is, the result was a liquid rubber. The result was a liquid rubber which he used to make these textile materials waterproof. Textiles made them waterproof. So he made textiles, Textiles, textiles waterproof. The raincoat was finally ready when he added a dash. Okay, let's see. The rainproof cloth was quickly adopted by the British Army and Navy. It was sold to the public as the world's first raincoat, the Macintosh. Note he added K to Charles's name. So he added a K to Charles's name, and the raincoat was then ready. So we'll just write down when he added a K. So let's just go ahead and submit that K.